Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. How you guys doing? Good to see everybody. Awesome. Get everybody in here. Let's see what we got going on. All right, welcome to August, huh? Can't believe it. It's August. Crazy. How you guys doing? Good,
Good.
good.
How you doing, man?
Excellent, excellent. Still drinking on some coffee myself.
Oh yeah.
So, that was a quick month, huh? July went by. We didn't even see it, and it's gone now. So, let's see if we can make it through August, see what August brings. I don't know. It's a crazy world. I hope everybody's healthy and staying well and all that good stuff. We're still up here doing our thing. So, my cat's looking at me like saying, "What are you doing?" So, let's get some people in here. Give them a minute. It is exactly 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time in the mountains here. Hello, Drew. How you doing? Good to see everybody. We'll let everybody get on YouTube here. So we're streaming live on YouTube, and we're also here on StreamYard, of course. StreamYard allows 6 people in it at a time, kind of thing. I'm going to pull up my little notes thing here. Talk about what we want to do. Let's see if this works. Boom. So I think we got something interesting today. I hope. We'll see here. See if you guys are into it or not. Chrome tab, that one. Yes, share that one. Wonderful. I like it. I know this is, we won't get too awfully formal, but a little bit formal. So this is what we're going to do. Let's see, where are we? Yeah, good deal. Hey, greetings from hazy, hot, and humid Pennsylvania. Well, I hope it cools off for you. I think today we're going to, here in the mountains, we're sunny. Might get a little bit of rain this afternoon, but we're at about 18 degrees Celsius right now, about 65 degrees Fahrenheit. I think the high today is around 70, 72, 20, 21, 22 degrees Celsius. Good to see you. Good to see you, Sasha. Sasha says, hey, Quinn, good to see you, bro. Sorry, it's hard to type. I still wear my rubber gloves. There you go. Not a problem. Glad to see everybody in here. We're going to try to cover a couple of things today. Let me see if this is going to make any sense to you. First, I had a couple of things over the week, like I always do, about some technical questions. I'm going to cover a little bit about, go over again about what happens in your silver bath with your salts, kind of talk a little bit about that, and also exciting the silver bath. Actually, I had 2 emails. One from John, who says he's traveling today somewhere. I can't remember. I think he's in Pennsylvania or Maryland. I can't remember. But we talked a little bit about the iodides. These 2 things kind of go together, silver bath and salt, what happens in exciting the silver bath. And then happy to take any of your questions. And then I thought we'd do a little bit of conceptual questions, food for thought. I did say Susan Sontag's book on photography, which we'll talk about a little bit, but I also have 2 more. Barthes' Camera Lucida and Berger's Ways of Seeing. We'll talk a little bit about those 2 things. So that's kind of what we have on the agenda today. So if you're just coming in and you're watching the video, whether it's, today or 5 years from now, you'll kind of know. I want to just kind of lay these out so everybody can see what we're doing. And you have any questions, just stop me and say, hey, what's up with that? Let me see if I can view full screen here. And just stop me and say, we want to talk about this or that or the other, whatever it might be. So good deal. I'll just try to keep my, I'll try to keep an eye on the chat as we do this. but at the same time, I'm definitely going to have to be over here on my slideshow here. So let's do these technical questions and answers. And let's start with this silver bath and salts. You guys have heard me. It's in my book. I think it's page 53 or 58. I can't remember what page number it is. But we talk about double decomposition, or metathesis. Double decomposition. What is that? What happens when you put the salts and the collodion on your plate with your ether and alcohol, right? And you let it skin over and you put it in your silver bath. What is the action that takes place? This, I always tell people, this is the critical point of making the process work. In other words, this is the engine, so to speak, that drives it. If it were a car, you know, the developer might be the wheels, the fix might be the brakes, whatever metaphor you want to use. This is the engine that drives it. This is what forms the halogens in order to make your plate sensitive to light. So the silver baths and salts, double decomposition is the chemical or the process we're going to talk about. A double decomposition reaction is a reaction in which the positive ions and negative ions in two compounds switch partners to form two new compounds. That's the most critical thing. You're taking two compounds, introducing them to, in this case, an iodide and a bromide, and introducing them to a silver nitrate compound. And those switch places. And what I mean by that is this. So you see the silver nitrate, plus in this case, we have the ammonium iodide, which is the NH4I. You can use Ki, it doesn't matter. The important part is the I portion of that. So the AgNO3 plus the NH4I equals AgI, or silver iodide. That's the light sensitive halogen. That's the main kind of main byproduct of it, if you will. So you have a couple of byproducts from this, actually, and same with the CDBr, or any whatever bromide you use. So the silver and the bromide interact, form silver bromide, and the byproduct is CdNO3, NH4O3. Those are ammonium nitrates and cadmium nitrates basically coming off. So that's what happens in the bath. That's how these light-sensitive halogens are formed, by this double decomposition reaction. So if you have anything go wrong, you're going to have a problem with making your image. So this kind of leads in, and here's an illustration of it. So your A and D is your final compound. Your A, B, and your CD, cations and anions are the positive and negative ions in the process. You can see there the illustration. The two byproducts, of course, are ammonium and nitrates, depending on what you end up with. As far as the salts used, they're always going to be iodides and bromides. So those are the two halogens we're talking about when we form that light sensitive material on the plate. So you have your salts and your collodion, pour it on the plate, let it skin over, you push the plate into the silver bath. That double decomposition happens, that transfer, changing from NH4I to AgI, changing from CDBr, cadmium bromide, or ammonium bromide to silver bromide. And this is the process that has to take place. This is one of the questions this week, was what is this exciting the bath? What do we talk about? What do we mean by when we talk about that? Before this double decomposition reaction can take place, the silver bath actually has to be full, basically, of silver iodide. You can see here a solution of silver nitrate dissolves a small portion of silver iodide. The quantity dissolved depending upon the strength of the silver bath. And I'd also add there the pH too plays a role in it as well. A fresh solution of silver nitrate will acquire it from the iodized collodion when immersed in it. Therefore, to prevent the iodide in the film being dissolved out from the first place used in it, the exciting bath should be saturated with silver iodide previous to use. To effect this purpose, I generally prepare glass with a very thick film of iodized collodion. And I even say highly iodized collodion. The more red you can make it, the better, or get it, the better. And plunge it in when set. Plunge it when set into the silver bath and allow it to remain in for several hours or a day. The bath will acquire by this means sufficient silver iodide to prevent it from acting on the prepared plate. In other words, it won't steal the iodides from the prepared plate. That comes from the collodion process on glass by our man Frederick Scott Archer in 1854. So in order for that first process, that reaction, double decomposition reaction, to take place, the bath must be full of iodides. And that means that you have to submerge, and I always say glass, I don't recommend using aluminum. Pour a highly iodized collodion onto a piece of glass, put it in the bath, and leave it for several hours or even a day. And that way, it fills your bath up. You can switch out the process. It'll create your film, basically. Archer calls it a film. I know some people don't. Film or emulsion. The iodides, silver iodide and silver bromides will form through the double decomposition reaction, and that's what you get, is a piece of sensitive plate or film. So if this is stolen from the plate, if you don't excite a bath, that bath is going to fill up with iodides. It's going to, like he says, dissolves a small portion of silver iodide and fill the bath up. It's going to take from those first couple of 3 plates. And depending on the size of the plate, what does the plate look like? It looks really flat and nasty, not well formed. It's easy to tell. You're not producing the silver iodide that you need, the AGI, which is basically the most prominent halogen on the plate. The bromides, I don't want to say take a back seat, but a little bit, they kind of take a back seat to that. So that's the basic rundown of what happens when you sensitize a plate with salted collodion and excite a bath before you sensitize it. It's really important. People forget that this is critical in forming that film, or that emulsion, if you will. And again, I use the word emulsion. I know we're talking about silver suspended on top and just under the collodion, so it's not embedded like a film, but those are words we're familiar with, so I like to use them. So film or emulsion, the surface sensitivity of it, if it's not fully saturated, the bath isn't fully saturated when you put your plate in, it's going to steal the iodides from the plate. You won't form a good image on the plate. At least for a handful of plates. You can waste your collodion and your time if you want, I guess. But at the end of the day, you're going to have a problem forming that image without the iodides present, or enough. So that's kind of the quick overview, if you will, or the rundown of that, if you will, on how those plates become sensitive to light. At the point of you pouring the collodion on the plate with just the salts in them, that means nothing as far as light goes, right? We know that. We can pour that in bright sunlight. It doesn't matter. But once you introduce those 2 salts to that silver bath, that reaction starts happening and starts forming your film or emulsion on the plate, or your halogens is probably a better way to say it. So just keep in mind that this is the engine that's driving this process. And if you have problems, I'm not going to say they're always in the silver bath, but that's the first place that you may look, either for solvents. Your bath is saturated with solvents. You haven't excited a new bath. You're not forming. You're over iodized, and you're forming pinholes. This is all coming from this general idea of the double decomposition reaction in those compounds coming together and switching over and creating film. That's why you want the optimal conditions to do that. Temperature, pH, silver content, all of that stuff is really, really critical. That's what we talk about. And maybe I would have talked about this week, but maybe I'll do it next week. It's really critical that you maintain your silver bath in a certain way to get consistent results and to form that, create those halogens in a way that it's going to give you the best, the optimal conditions to make with exposure and development, right? To make the optimal image. That's what you're after. So that kind of explains that, I hope. Hello, Linda from Sweden. Nice to see you as well, too. Oh, what's cool is I can pop those kind of up on, there she is, kind of pop it up on the screen there for a second. So those are the two questions I got this week. One about, oh, and let me address John's, John had a question embedded with those iodide questions, or the other iodide question. How often do you need to excite a bath? Let's say you make a new silver bath. Let's say you do 1 liter and you put 85 or 90 grams of silver in there, 8.5%, 9% solution. You excite it. You take a glass plate, you pour that highly iodized collodion on there, let it sit in there for a few hours or overnight. You filled the bath up with iodides. Now you're ready to pour your plate and start your double decomposition reaction, forming those halogens and making your plate, and on and on and on. So you do this a while. You do some light maintenance on your bath, meaning you filter it. Maybe every once in a while you sun it and filter all the byproducts out, right? Remember, all that organic material, all those byproducts you form 2 new compounds, but you also have 2 new compounds in the solution as well, too. So there's things going on there. John's question was, he usually he evaporates all the water out of his silver bath. So all he's left with is white crystals again. And then he says he reconstitutes that with additional water and he pulls the iodides out of it. So you get that milky blue color, all that. You do it up again. I say do it while you don't have to reduce it to crystals. But once that bath, it dissolves out, the silver iodide's present, the free iodide's present in the silver bath, you generally never have to excite that bath again. I'm not going to say never, because some people do crazy stuff out there. So generally, once that bath is full of iodides, you're basically now going to be chasing it to not get it too full. Remember, when it goes overboard, it's like a room. You can only fit so much furniture in it. And then once you can't fit any more furniture in it, the furniture starts spilling outside of the room. That's what happens with the iodides. They'll start falling out, precipitating out of the solution onto your plate, basically dissolving out and creating little pinholes everywhere. That's what the battle you'll fight from the minute you iodize or excite your bath. You're going to fight keeping those in check all the way through. And then when you hit the point where you have to pull some of them out, you're never going to have a shortage, is what I'm saying. So typically you only have to excite your bath once. That's kind of the point of that. So typical problem, if you don't excite your bath, you're going to have flat, nasty, just really bad looking plates until that bath is full of iodides. If you have a bath full of solvents, alcohol and ether, if it smells strongly of those compounds, you'll probably get what I call solvent streaks, or marks on the plate where it's trying to create that double decomposition reaction, but the solvents are getting in the way of that, and you'll have different types of streaks on the plate. Temperatures can kind of screw things up too. Different temperatures you want to keep consistent if you can, or stay consistent. There's plenty of things that can be tied back to improperly maintained or improperly made silver bath. I mean, it's what I think Towler said this in the Silver Sunbeam. He said the silver bath, I'm paraphrasing, of course, he said the silver bath is the easiest compound or the easiest chemical to make in this process. It's the most difficult to maintain. And it's true. You add silver nitrate to some distilled or deionized water, and there's your bath, right? You excite it, all that stuff. Tim says, since my bath was excited, I'm trying to get it up there. Since my bath is excited, there is silver iodide in solution. Why is the bath itself not light sensitive? Great question, Tim. That's a very good question, right? And you're right. You do have silver iodide in your solution, right? But you don't have any organic material to hold on to it. In other words, you don't have a substrate, if you will. You stick your finger in it and put it in the sun, there's your substrate. It's going to react with even more so. It's going to react with the light and the salts in your body and all that stuff, and it'll turn black. But it needs the materials, whether it's the collodion, the other salts, the main salts in the bath, right? We're talking about it's full of iodide, but it's still going to do this double decomposition reaction on the salts on the plate and create those halogens. There's nothing to create the halogen or to print it out as it's suspended in the silver. There's, if your bath, here's how you can tell if you're maintaining your bath well. Keep it in a clear bottle and put it out in the light and see if you get a little film of nasty black stuff at the bottom, or if it clouds up. If you get any problems like that, it tells you that you're not maintaining your bath well enough. A lot of people like to keep their silver bath in the dark and never let it be exposed. And that you can work like that for a while, but at the end of the day, it's going to catch up with you. I like to sun my baths. I like to keep them aerated. I like to keep everything tight on the silver side. So I hope that answers the question. There's no organic material in there. It's completely clean. There's nothing to grab onto, basically, and print out, if you will. Sasha said, I always use 2 silver baths. So when I use the other, I'm maintaining while I'm using the other. Change the silver bath every week and have never problems. Yep, that's a good methodology. In fact, that's what I recommend. Stop, I'm lying. I've really had bad problems pouring a plate accidentally with Sandrak instead of over. Well, yeah, that happens too. There's all kinds of problems with people mixing up if they're not labeled properly, if you don't have them in certain jars or containers or that you recognize and oh, that's varnish and that's collodion. Because if you'll notice, at some point in time, these all start looking the same. They get to an age where they change color, so your varnish and your collodion look the same. Your developer can go off color, right? Start rusting. Jan says, I fixed the problem with my albumin prints. What did you do, Jan?
Before I pre-wash my print before washing with fresh water, and then I have salt in.
Yeah.
And that was the problem, because I have the chlorine in the fresh water into house. So I take away the salts, and I have some acid in my silver bath, citric acid, and then the problem was not more.
Oh, yeah, you basically okay. What you're saying, you were adding a mineral to it or a salt to it and pulling the silver off the print. Yep.
Yes, I take away the salts when I take
the
first wash, because I have a chlorine, and to get a little more red tones and a little sharper, I have
sodium
2
citrate.
grams of citric acid. Citric acid,
or you can use sodium citrate. Citrate. You can use that as well. If you want a little more red to it, you can change colors depending on the salt you use. Yeah, good. Yeah, let's see. Let me see if I can pull that up. Oh, let me see if I can blow you up here.
Very good.
Here we go. Oh yeah. There you go. Yeah, you have much better range in that. You have your darks are darker, and yeah, that looks good, Jan. Good job. That looks really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Super. Taking the salts away, guys. Right. That's the trick right there. So you don't, because the salts are going to combine with the silver and pull it. You kind of want that in a way if you're trying to get rid of free silver, but not silver off your print. Yeah. Good deal. Awesome. Drew says, you recommend a brief aeration after each session. If you can do that, Drew, I highly recommend that, because at the end of the day, your silver bath, one of the biggest problems I see, and I'm recommending more now, even more than sunning in some cases, aeration. People do not aerate their baths well enough. And once you leave all that alcohol and ether in your bath, you're going to have problems. The images aren't going to be clean. They're not going to be sharp. They're not going to, there's all kinds of, you're going to get striations on them eventually. There's all kinds of problems that particular resolution, evaporating, allowing that aeration, evaporating those solvents off the bath. If you open your silver bath and you smell it and you can smell solvent strongly, you need to aerate. And that'll solve a lot of problems right off the bat, not just sunning, but also aerating them. So really important to do that. It's again, like I said, I'm stressing that more now than I'm even sometimes sunning. Aeration it seems to be creeps up on you quite quickly, because like, you know, depending on the size of your plate you're using, you're putting basically wet or pretty wet solvent filled plates into that bath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 plates later, you know, you've got a bath it's pretty saturated with solvents actually, and you can smell them. Smell your bath. You're always going to have a slight off tinge metallic alcohol smell to it, because that just kind of hangs around. You should never be able to smell ether in your bath, because that's the most that'll come right off. That tells me you're just keeping everything locked up tight and you're not letting anything aerate. So get rid of that ether smell. Get rid of as much alcohol smell as you can, and keep that bath maintained. That's the biggest thing people mess up here, is not maintaining that bath, and not, you know, and I don't recommend boiling it or putting it on a stove like people do. You've heard me say a million times, you know, silver fulminate is a real thing. It's the exact ingredients. It's in that silver nitrate, 80 degrees Celsius. You don't know when you're going to form silver fulminate. If you don't know what that is, Google silver fulminate and take a look. Sun it. You know, you'll be fine. You can maintain it with just sunning it. So absolutely, Drew, no problem. So let's see. We can come back to technical. I just want to run through these real quick. I'm not going to spend too much time, not a whole lot of time here. But if you've not read, and what got me on this is I started going through my annotated bibliography from my graduate degree, and I posted that up on Chemical Pictures on the Facebook page. If you want to read through that bibliography or look at books and films that I used doing my graduate degree, there's some gems in there. There's for sure some really nice eye-opening, especially if you're trying to evolve and progress as an artist. I think there's a lot of good both books and films in that bibliography. It's annotated, so I write a little bit about each one of them. I think there's enough there to get you interested in asking the question about what is it that I'm doing? Why am I doing it? How do I make it better? Those kinds of things, or discovering the questions on your own actually too. But if you haven't seen that list, this is one of the books on that list, is on photography, is really 6 or 7 essays that Sontag wrote for the New Yorker, I believe it was, and then it was compiled into a book in the late 70s. This is 1977. But if you haven't read this book, it's a dense book, meaning you might have to read it once or twice, and there's some areas that you might have to kind of chew on for a while and to try to understand them. But there's some really good insights into thinking about photography. I know a lot of people say she's anti-photography, and you know, maybe you could make a case for that for sure. But as a person who wants to grow and wants to understand different viewpoints about what it is that I'm doing and how people see it and what they think about it, I'm not offended. Just like Baudelaire, in the 19th century French poet, writer and poet, he hated photography basically, and he wrote about how mechanical it is and how meaningless it is and all that stuff. And he's got some really good insight on that. So Sontag has similar viewpoints in a lot of these areas, but the insight she gives in how the photographs how photographs function and how we use them in society. And keep in mind, this is What, this is almost 50 years ago too. I mean, she died in, I think she died in the mid 2000s. She was in her 70s, but this gives you insight into one person's view on how photography functions, or how we view photography, or how we think about consciously and unconsciously, how we categorize, how we look at photographs, how we use the camera for different in different ways to either, overcome our shortcomings or interfere with dealing with reality, those kinds of things. So anyway, this is on photography, Susan Sontag, and I've got 2 quotes from her. And we'll just briefly touch on these, and I'll go to the other ones as well too. And I got a couple of questions we can talk about at the end here, but you can read that. There is something predatory in the act of taking a picture. To photograph people is to violate them by seeing them as they never see themselves, by having knowledge of them that they can never have. It turns people into objects that can be symbolically possessed. Now, that sounds harsh. That sounds very, she even uses the word objectifies objects. But if you think about this, and I've thought about this quote a lot, because once you put a person in front of the camera and you're the photographer or the artist, you basically have that control. And if you've read Berger's The Male Gaze, or a lot of these ideas about men photographing women and the power play and the control there and the those kinds of things, she's really, this is just not a male-female thing, this is in general people. She's really onto something here about violating them in ways, having knowledge about that person that they'll never have or they've never had, and then having the object itself, right? The artifact. Like today we photograph on our phones and we scroll through and we upload and stuff, but in this particular process, what Collodion, we actually have the object, whether it's a print or a plate or whatever. So if you think about this in terms of where is my line, where do I say that I'm not objectifying or that I'm not crossing that line ethically on making photographs of people? For what reason? Are they titillating? Are they fantastic? Are they like exploitative, right? That kind of thing. And I've been challenged with some of my work before, definitely. All kinds of from everything from race to religion, suicide, ethnicities, marginalized communities, those kinds of things. So this is something to think about. If you're a portrait photographer or you make photographs of people, Sontag has some great insight into that kind of work. And then the second one is, the second quote is, to photograph is to appropriate the thing photographed. And here's where we can start asking some questions. What does that mean? What does that mean to you? To photograph is to appropriate the thing photographed. What does that mean exactly? Does anybody have any, you don't have to chime in, but if you want to jump in here, let's have a little conversation about this. What does that mean, to appropriate something? That means to take it and to put it in to your own context, right? So you hear about this cancel culture and some of the more politically active people talking about there's a big thing in California called Coachella, a music festival thing, I think. I don't really know what it is, but I've seen photographs of young white blonde women dressed up as Native Americans and great big the costumes of Native Americans, the dress, they're using them as costumes, but the dress, right? Sacred, symbolically sacred things. And here's a young 22-year-old white blonde woman all dressed up in that. That's what they call cultural appropriation, right? She probably doesn't mean any harm in it. She probably, that's one of the problems, just not thinking about that thing. But she's appropriating another culture and using it for her own gain, if you will, right? So when we make photographs, and especially of people, who are different than us. My philosophy and the way I approach it, my methodology has always been, I have to think about what I'm doing here. Why am I doing this? And again, going back to those kinds of things we talked about before, and we'll get to some of those in a couple of slides here, but why am I doing this? What is the outcome? What is the narrative? Am I justified in doing this? Can I defend the work? Is it something that's not even it may be perceived as appropriation? And it is. I guess it really is. It's really appropriation, regardless of the way I look at it, because I am taking, there's images right up there on the screen. I am taking, making commentary on marginalized communities, suicide, genocide, all kinds of things. So I know what I'm approaching, and the problem with appropriation, the problem with objectifying. People always use the example, and you can read Berger's The Male Gaze, and not only Berger's, but The Male Gaze period, about that power play between, the photographer, the artist, making photographs of young nude women, and how women walk in the world and how they see themselves, and how our cultures have kind of turned this thing into a power play. And in photography, it brings it out. And Sontag writes a lot about this. But the main things are talking about portrait photography, talking about making photographs of people, objectifying them, and then possessing them symbolically, right? Having the photograph in your hand, you're possessing them symbolically. And then, of course, to appropriate. Everything photographed now is appropriated, because you're bringing you photograph that object or that person or that scene or whatever it is, you're bringing that, you're appropriating it to something that you have in your mind, whether you're conscious of that or not. I mean, you just are. So a couple of things to think about there, I hope. Okay, so Berger's, if you've never read John Berger's Ways of Seeing, it was on the BBC in the early 70s, and then later turned into a book. But either way, watch the series, read the book, or both, even better. This is really good. The relation between what we see and what we know is never settled. Each evening, we see the sunset. We know that the earth is turning away from it, yet the knowledge, the explanation, never quite fits the sight. Isn't that true? If you think about that, read that again and think about that. We're poetic. We take poetic license with everything, right? We know the physics behind this. We know the earth is rotating and turning on its axis. We know there's a certain amount of time that takes, and we see the sunset. But we see this beautiful thing or this amazing thing, and we're never really fitting it up with that explanation. It never quite fits the sight, as he says, which is really, that's amazing. And I often think about, I'll go back to Berger's here. I often think about this when I'm, especially in Wet Collodion. One of the thoughts I had when I read this, and I thought about this for a while, was when I'm trying to explain to somebody, there's a certain level of craft or mastery you can have to this with this process, and really with any process, but specifically this one, because our audience knows what we're talking about here. There's always this element, and we talked about it before, there's always this element of serendipity, right? Not quite knowing what you're going to get with the process. Even if you've worked in it for decades or, years or whatever, there's always this element. And ever since I read this quote from Berger, I've always thought about that. It's like built into Wet Collodion. The explanation never quite fits the sight. In other words, your plate gives you these gifts that you never saw in the scene, or something happened, or even marks and mistakes, quote unquote. We talked about that before, written off of these artifacts as artistic. It's true. And to be open to this idea that we can explain something, and yet what we see, he's just talking really about the impact of the visual, right? The impact. And we're here because we're having this discussion. Obviously, people in this room and this watching this video or in this room care about visuals. We're all maybe more in tune with our visual side than some people, or consider ourselves more interested in the visual than the written word, or whatever it might be. So a great way to think about making photographs, right? Just a kind of a divergent from Sontag, but again, Berger talks a lot about appropriation, especially cultural appropriation, the male gaze, about objectifying people, especially women, making photographs, things like really good information for people that want, again, that are interested in getting some insight into what they're doing and why they're doing it. Roland Barthes, Camera Lucida, and there's a longer title for this, looking at contemporary photography or something. But if you haven't read him, you should read him as well. And this is the last one I'm going to touch on, then we'll ask some questions. But he says, when we define the photograph as a motionless image, this does not mean only that the figures in it represents do not move. It means they do not emerge. They do not leave, in other words. They are anesthetized and fastened down like butterflies. This is really, I mean, this really gets to the worm at the core, if you will. It's a hard line. It's a struggle. Exploitation and exploration is a very fine line. And as photographers, we have to walk that. Not even if you don't photograph people, you can, this is an ethical and moral dilemma and question throughout art, basically. But we as photographers, as artists, using the camera, having that kind of power to fasten down or anesthetize and fasten down people or places like butterflies. It's a very powerful way to think about what we do. It's a very insightful way to think about what we do. And then just here, in his personal subjective examination of multiple photographs, Barthes proceeds to note a duality that was characteristic of certain photographs, a co-presence of two discontinuous elements, what he terms the studium and the punctum. And if you've never heard of these, you should study this. You should take some time and study what he means, the studium and the punctum. And describe a little bit here. The studium refers to the range of meanings available and obvious to everyone. It's coded, the former term implying that the image is unified, self-contained, whole, whose meaning can be taken at a glance without effort of thinking. And while the latter implies that the pictorial space is ordered in a universal, comprehensible way. So the studium is what we get, kind of like when we talked about Barrett's describing the photograph. We're describing what's in it. Everybody knows what a chair looks like. Everybody knows what a mountain looks like. Everybody knows what a fence looks like. That's kind of the studium. I mean, it's deeper than that, but that's the studium. Then the studium speaks of the interest which we show in a photograph, the desire to study and understand what the meanings are in a photograph, to explore the relationship between the meanings and our own subjectivities. The punctum, a Latin word derived from the Greek word for trauma, interestingly enough, on the other hand, inspires an intensely private meaning, one that is suddenly, unexpectedly recognized and consequently remembered. It shoots out of the photograph like the arrow pierces me. It escapes language like it's real. It's not easily communicable with language. The punctum is historical as an experience of the irrefutable indexicality of the photograph, its contingency upon a referring, right? The punctum is a detail or partial object that attracts and holds the viewer's, the spectator's gaze. It pricks or wounds the observer. So in a nutshell, the punctum is super personal and super subjective. It's a quality you see in a photograph that you can't describe with words. It's a light hitting something. It's something in the photograph that you cannot, and that not everybody gets, but you cannot describe yourself. So, and the studium is the large framework of it. I think this is something you should actually look at studying and spend some time with, because it's fascinating to apply it to your own work and say, what is it about my work that I'm after? It will help you narrow down what it is, both the studium and the punctum, what you're trying to. I mean, maybe not so much the punctum, because that's super personal and questionable that way, but the studium for sure, and your own punctum. So this is what we'll kind of end with, or leave you with, or talk about if you want to. How do you contextualize the photographs you make? How do you work through that? What is it that you do? What framework or methodology do you use, and why? That's another great question, and kind of piggybacking on the first one. And what effect might this have on your work? As you start writing or talking about or documenting these questions and answering them legitimately and authentically, you can start to see the impact that how your work changes or evolves. And then what is your takeaway from any of the writers, thinkers, or philosophers here? And I am open. If you guys want to, anybody have anything they want to say or add or talk about here? I just wanted to share some things that had some connections with what I've done conceptually and the path. And this that got me thinking last week when we were talking about the books. And then like I said, I broke out my bibliography and I started looking at it, and it got me thinking I should probably share a little bits of these tiny bits. These are just little pieces and fragments, but share some of this stuff, because at the end of the day, honestly, I don't think we can grow or progress as artists or photographers or whatever you want to call yourself if we don't, Socratize it, right? The Socratic philosophy, examine ourselves, ask questions, get down to the nitty gritty, not avoiding things. Just because you don't know doesn't justify. Like if I say, why did you make that photograph? And I don't know. It's pretty, it's whatever. What we're trying to do is we're trying to examine the progress of there's ultimately something that we're trying to say, and we're trying to get to that goal, but we can't get to that goal unless we have the roadmap. And the only way we can get the roadmap is to ask some of these questions, because so many times people make photographs. And again, I've talked about this before, but they make photographs, especially in wet collodion. They get a lot of attention. They get a lot of adulation, a lot of likes, a lot of hearts, a lot of loves, whatever it is. And that's great. But I think sometimes it feeds the wrong motive. It reinforces the motive that I can make photographs without any context, completely objectified, completely out there with no beginning, middle, or end, no real narrative to say, no real objective to accomplish, no real message to give, nothing socially active. And if that's the case, if that's what you're doing, and you're doing the art for art's sake, the 19th century movement, say it. Say, that's what I do. I do art for art's sake. And then have an explanation for that. And be able to talk about your work in a way that you can piggyback and grow. Each project, each body of work you make becomes stronger, more informed, more deeper maybe. I will admit there is a beauty when you first come to this realization of how to tell stories and how to put your own spin, your own narrative on work you're doing, and how to transcend, like we just looked at some of those quotes, how to transcend some of those problems inherent in photography and justify them and be able to engage people. There's something very very authentic the first time you realize that in the first body of work you apply that to. Maybe it's like your first child or your first, whatever it might be. There's something special about that, because I never understood, I never realized that it was important to formulate this stuff. And I'm not talking about having, every answer to everything. We're talking in general terms, right? We're talking in having a general roadmap. I'm not talking about this strict kind of religious observant. This isn't a law or gospel. These are people sharing their insight, writers and philosophers and thinkers and artists sharing their philosophies on what all this means, trying to find meaning. And at the end of the day, that's really what it is. We're trying to make sense of our lives, right? Not to get too philosophical, but every human being, whether they regard this, whether they realize this or not, or regard it as a real question, is they're trying to find meaning, purpose in their lives, for their lives. And artists tend to gravitate to that earlier because we pick up some medium, sculpture, painting, writing, music, whatever, photography, whatever it is. We have some tool or vehicle that's inherently telling the viewers and the audience that we're presenting work to that we have something to say, that we found this medium that's a perfect medium for my message. I have something to say. And are you interested in hearing about my questions about my meaning or the purpose of my life and purpose in my life, why I'm here, what I'm doing, all that stuff. I'm not talking about the meaning of life. I'm talking about meaning in life. They're very different. I don't know what the meaning of life is. No one does. But meaning in life, in your life, is really important. And that's what Socrates was trying to get to. That's what all the great philosophers were trying to get to. And I think, for the most part, religions to some degree want to get to that as well too, but I don't think they do as good a job as some other ideas. Jay said, would you please share some thought about how you interact with your human subjects in reference to these thoughts? What to tell them before? Yeah, God, Jay, thank you for that. That's a great question. That's a question like I get when I'm kind of doing a lecture about, if I show my work and I talk about my work, that's one of the definitely a question that I get, because if you look at my photographs, you're going to see people who are definitely are marginalized, and I would definitely have the upper hand in control over them, right? So young, innocent, marginalized communities, mentally handicapped, mentally ill, all kinds of things that I just have that privilege over them, right? I am who I am. I am the way I am. So I'm very conscious about how I approach people to photograph. One thing, to Jay's question, one thing that I make sure of is that I'm completely honest and open up front. If they're part of a project, which they usually are, I approach them and I say, look, this is who I am. This is what I'm working on. The idea behind this is to tell stories about marginalized communities, to share information about basically to esteem them, to put them up, right? Sontag, Susan Sontag, one of the quotes we just looked at, or two of them. I stole her words out of that very book, and I titled my graduate thesis on her words. It's called Conferring Importance. And if you read that book on photography, she talks about anytime you point a camera at a person, you're conferring a sense of importance, or conferring importance on that, because you're photographing them, right? So there's this level of not everyone gets photographed, right? There's 7 billion people in the world, and not everyone gets photographed. Maybe today they are with the cell phones and all that, but what we're talking about in the context of this, I try to esteem. I try to tell them it's a very fine line here, right? We have to walk carefully, because I can be seen as exploitative and taking advantage of this situation because it'll look cool on a plate or it'll be interesting. But I try to tell them the truth. I try to be honest and authentic with them and say, this is the project that I'm working on. This is what it's about. And I feel that you would possibly fit into this project if you would sit for me and we can go through the process, and I'll tell you about the process, why I use the process, and we'll see what you look like on a piece of glass or metal. And we'll talk about that. We'll work through all of that, because at the end of the day, and I used to shoot videos on them too. I used to do a little video interviews. There's some still on my site up there, but I'd have them say, what was your experience like? What was this like for you, kind of thing. And make them understand that they're not, I'm not the power play here. I'm not the one like typically photographers have so much power and control, right? And I want to take that down. I always say, Jay, I always tell people that this portrait was co-created. I just didn't make it. The sitter co-created that with me. So I want to take that power play down of I'm the power, you're the sitter. I make you do this. I do have you do that. I'm in control of your body. I'm going to make you. I don't do any of that. I've never. People sit the way they want to sit. They exude their own kind of being. Their authentic being is what I want. Is a focus on intent? Yes. Context and intention. What are you making the photograph for? And what's your intention? What are you trying to say by making that photograph? And for me, marginalized communities, whether it's the Holocaust and the synagogues being destroyed, or whether it's Native Americans being massacred here in Colorado, or whatever project I've worked on, it's about telling the story, and it's about giving people a voice. I believe all art should be socially active. It has to be in some capacity socially active to be effective. In other words, I don't think there needs to be like a consumer call to action, like here's a butter commercial, we want you to buy our butter. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about maybe a call to action to think about why you avoid certain people, or you think about certain people that look like this way, or certain people that look like that way. I try to call people into question and have them question their own thoughts. And maybe that's the call, just to have you say, look, man, I've never thought about why I don't want to look at the homeless person on the side of the road, or why I don't want to think about the bad things in the world. That kind of inaction or indifference is really what my work addresses, is the idea that indifference is really bad for people. And someday when you're on the other side of that and people are showing indifference to your plights and your issues, it'll all come home to roost at some point. And that's kind of my message in my work. Yes, I want to make beautiful work. I think some of the portraits that I made are absolutely gorgeous. I think the people in them are absolutely beautiful in their own way. Beauty is a relative thing, and I'm not talking about cultural beauty. I'm talking about inner beauty and beauty that has an effect on people. To see a photograph of a person you don't know and to be engaged by it or with it, that's powerful. Oh, good, Samuel. I think the same as you about it. Good. And I'm not trying to convert people over to my way of thinking. I'm trying to share how I've approached my methodology, right? What framework or methodology do you use and why? That second question there. That's what I try to do now, is I try to, if people are interested in my work, and there's been a few over the years that have been interested in my work, and I'm thankful for that, I try to engage them on context and intention. This is the context that I made the photographs in, and this was my intention of why I made the photographs. This is what I want to have come out. I want people, I always say that the art in my photography, the art happens, because primarily I'm a portrait photographer, the art happens with the exchange of me and that sitter, having that dialogue, going through the process. That's where the art happens. And the residue of that is the plate. The residue of that interaction, that art happening. And art to me, again, is changing people's lives, making them think about something, giving me something to think about. I do art because I grow from it. I hope I become a better person, a better human being, more understanding, more compassion, those kinds of things. I think that's what art can do for you. As a creator of art, I think you should be on this, lifelong learning path. And that's what photography is, as an art form, has allowed me to do. Learn about myself, about my heritage, about people who are different, about why we treat people differently. And the photographs are just a vehicle, a catalyst, if you will, to get in and have these conversations with people. Because the biggest thing we need, the most important thing we need in the world today is that conversation, to start that dialogue, that discourse, right? to try to soften and quell situations that are hot or tense, to have the discourse and to learn about one another, and to Mark Twain had a great quote about, you want to kill prejudice and bigotry, travel. See the world, see how other people live. And that's so true. We get in our bubbles, we get cooped up in our own little worlds, and I'm guilty of it too. There's no exception here for me at all. And we get thinking in ways that we probably shouldn't be. And art is a great vehicle. It's a great way to share an idea, to put a little stone in somebody's shoe and make them think about something, to kind of agitate them, irritate them a little bit, and maybe make them feel a little bit guilty even. Why not? Why not confront your own prejudice and your own biases and your own, problems that way? That, man, if there's a problem in the world today, it's definitely people not facing those. Jay says, I've always been afraid to add socially active into my photography. Is that where you add the element of having something to say with your work? Jay, I know what you're saying. I know exactly what you mean by that. Once you say socially active, it triggers off all kinds of stuff, right? But the context we're using socially active in is the context of saying that I'm a human being. This is weighing heavy on my heart or my head or both, this idea, this project that I'm working on, and I want to share it with you. I want to see if this touches you or interests you in any way. That's socially active to me, meaning that here's a question, a problem, something heavy on my heart or my head or both, like I said, and I need to get it out there. I need to express this, and I need to see if it resonates with anyone. And that's what starts the discourse or the dialogue. That's what starts the conversations about how we treat other people, how we're treated, whether it mostly deals with justice, right? Socrates walked around in the marketplace 2,500, 2,800 years ago in Athens and walk up and say, what is justice? Describe justice. What is justice, right? What is truth? These big, deep, simple questions. That's socially active to me. If your work, and I'm not talking about photojournalism, I'm not talking about reporting on a story or a feature, a documentary work. I'm talking about making artwork that addresses a concern, a question, or a problem that's really heavy on you, that you're authentically connected to, that you're authentically concerned with, and making work about that, right? Not just getting on the latest trend of what's popular and it's derivative stuff, right? Derivative is a bad word. It's just a knockoff. It's emulating something that's already been done because it got attention, right? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about work that's truly authentic to you. And in that way, you'll never have a problem including socially active in the work, because you always have something to say about your work. Whether you know it or not, you have something to say about your work. And what I'm saying is get to know what it is you have to say about your work. That's the problem with a lot of folks. And I know it offends a lot of folks, and I know it puts people off. But if you can't talk about your work, if you can't tell me why you made it, if you can't tell me the context and the intention behind it, if you can't tell me the framework or the methodology you used and why doing it, who influences you? Who have you read? Who have you studied? What are your concerns? All of those things are all socially, we're humans. Anytime you engage another human being, you're being socially active, whether it's on YouTube or Zoom or in person or in your living room at a football game, you're being socially active. It's just, I feel like as artists, our obligation should be, we should be obligated to talk about things that matter, not just the weather, right? We should be talking about things that matter. Our artwork should be making a difference in somebody's life. Now, you can say, well, I can make a difference in somebody's life. I can make a beautiful photograph, vase of flowers and a beautiful vase, a beautiful light, and they can put it on their wall. That's great. That's perfect. And you're right. That's meaning for them. That's beauty. That's all that. But that conversation is going to stop right there. That's not really going to go any further than saying, oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, it is. It's gorgeous. Oh, who made it? Oh, what is it? Oh, it's a salt print from a wet collodion negative, and there are flowers that bloom in this time of year, blah, blah, whatever. And then the conversation is going to end. And what I'm talking about, artists taking it further than that, is having having something to engage them with, having, you know, the work that you're connected to that means something to you. So sorry, I went on too long. For me, even if it's just a couple of shootings without specific meaning, I try to bring their ideas within, so to create an image with the subject to make both sides enjoy it. If you yes, Samuel, that's good. And you're probably talking about, and this happens a lot, anyone working in wet collodion knows this. You have somebody that wants to come over for a photograph, or, oh, will you make my photograph? Maybe you even set up a little pop-up shop in a bar or a restaurant or on the side of the road or whatever. And you'll have random people come up and you'll do their portraits, or you'll do family or friends or whatever. I know what you mean. And even that, bringing those ideas to that is good. What I use those kinds of events for, whether they're commercial and I'm making money doing portraits, or I'm doing something that's non-project oriented, I use that time as technical time. My plate, how do I adjust the light, processing my plates, what choices do I make? I use that all technical for technical prowess and expertise. And then I convert that over to my project. So everything I'm doing, whether I'm making photographs that are practice, or looking at another technique, or a possible end solution for what's the end product going to be? Is it going to be prints or plates, or what type of prints? I use that time to use it as technical, but I understand what you're saying. In order to make a nice portrait, you need to engage. And that's what wet plate allows you to do. You can really engage the sitter, and it's beautiful. So, there's no wrong way to photograph. I'm not saying there's some right way to photograph. What I'm saying is, as artists, as thinkers, as philosophers, as people who care about the way they live, they care about meaning in their lives, they care about making a difference. There's a Jewish saying that says we need to leave the world a better place than we found it, right? That kind of idea of saying, what did my life mean, or what did my life matter? If you leave something behind that's positive, that can engage people, I'm so grateful. I pull out my books, my 100-year-old books, and I open them up and I start reading them, and I say, man, thank you, Mr. or Mrs. whoever 150 years ago for writing this. This changed my life, right? Thank you for writing this 50 years ago. Thank you for writing this 2,000 years ago. Those kinds of engagements, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, as artists, as people who care, making a difference through your work. That's all. And if you're making photographs, you just have to figure out why, right? A lot of people are saying, well, God, I just make them. This guy's rambling on about all this meaning and all this context and all this research. What I'm saying is, you just need to get on the path to start finding out why you do what you do, just like I did, just like everybody else has done. Just because you don't know why you're doing it now, or you have a superficial reason, doesn't mean you don't know. You do know. It's just difficult to get there. That's the journey, right? That's the hard part. Making the work isn't the difficult part. It's talking about the work. It's giving the work meaning. It's having the work engage with an audience. That's the difficult part, right? If it's not sensational or popular, or that kind of stuff. Hello, Deidre. Even though many of our photographs seem superficial, oh, I don't know about that. Most actually have a deep esoteric meaning to me, and I'm happy to explain them. Perfect, Deidre. That's what I'm saying. In fact, the best way to approach something like that is people say, oh, this guy's making all these abstract images, or this person's making these kind of weird things, and they all seem random and blah, blah, blah. And then, a year or two later, you see a book published by them, and they have all the context, and they've written about them, and you say, oh my God, that's amazing, right? I think you get you get a lot more bang for your buck, if you will, not to use a capitalist term, but you get a lot more out of your work and the meaning behind it if you publish or you share and put that work into context. I mean, it's easy to put a photograph up and let people just bring their own filters to it, and they will. They'll say, oh, that reminds me of when I was a kid at the lake, or whatever it is. They'll bring their own filters to it if you don't say anything about it. But you're the creator, you're in control of that. Bring your context, bring your intention, start telling us about the work. Bring your story. You don't have to lay your whole story out. Just just start asking questions. I'm interested in this, and I'm working on photographs about this topic or this idea. What people need and what photographers, and you'll read about this both in Sontag's book and in Camera Lucida, Roland's book. You'll read about this idea that, and I'll paraphrase here, that photographers get away with murder, right? Everybody can have a camera, right? Set a person down in front of a canvas and a paintbrush and a bunch of paint and see what they do. Sit them down, give them a guitar and some sheet music and see what they can do, right? We get away with a lot of things that other artists don't get away with. And in both of those books, they talk about being kind of universally accepted because a photograph is so ubiquitous, right? So anybody can make them, you can post them. So we have to, in my mind, we have to start differentiating these blades of grass. And all these blades of grass are, yeah, those kind of consumer photographs or those kind of commercial stuff, or they kind of do it for fun, or family photographs or whatever. And over here are people using a medium to talk about something that's important to them. And that's all I'm really saying is use your medium to support your message and inform your message and to engage people. I mean, there's a reason I use wet plate, even beyond just the obvious aesthetic of it, right? There's a reason. It's engaging. Everybody knows this. You make a photograph. You can photograph a pumpkin and put it on like, you know what I mean? And yeah, it's valid. People like it. It's interesting looking at something different. You know, that's valid. We get that. But then the second part of that is missing the reason why that image was made, the context and the intention behind that. And you can say, hey, I was just testing my collodion. The light looked good. I wanted to try this new lens. I'm trying to get my plates clean. I'm working on my process. You don't have to make something up about the pumpkin. You can just say, hey, yeah, this is a cool photograph. Look at how this turned out. And you know what? I learned something. If I ever want to make a photograph with this light or this kind of look and feel, these are the tools that I use over here, right? Another arrow in my quiver that I can pull out and use if I need to. That's kind of the differentiating point for me. If you're a process photographer and you love just to work in a billion different processes, which there's a little bit of that in me for sure. I love to dabble around in different processes just to have some fun and to see what they do. But if you're a process photographer, you don't have anything to say about the work you make. It's all technical. It's all to see what this compound did with this, what this paper looked like, what this amount of light did, what this did, and then maybe I sell a few prints if they're pretty or whatever. And that's great. That's fine. All you have to do is say, I'm a process photographer, and I know exactly what you're talking about. Or I'm a commercial photographer, and I go out and I do pop-ups and I make portraits, or I do still lifes, or I'm hired by magazines to do, you know, this or that or whatever. And you're making photographs for money, and you're making them under the direction of someone, and you're a commercial photographer. That's great. No problem. Beautiful photographs, great work, technically strong, wonderful, super. And then you come to an artist, and the artist is they've selected this process for a reason. They've selected their subject matter for a reason. They've got intention behind the work. They can tell you about it. They're not getting paid for it yet, maybe. Maybe they will, you know, who knows? But at the end of the day, your motivation, your intention is coming from yourself. I've got this thing on my heart or my head. I've got to express this, and I'm looking for the right tools and the right way to do it. And at the end of the day, you have to really examine why, and that's not just wet plate, but why you're using anything that you use, right? Why am I using this process? Why? We never ask these questions enough. And I think it gets a lot of people in trouble because, you know, and I'll reiterate this, I've said it before, a lot of people get in trouble with this process because they get it down, they make beautiful photographs, and then they're put on kind of a pedestal, if you will, and what they're going to find out at the end of the day, it's all empty down below, and they're sitting up, and it's going to crumble. There's not a whole lot to hang on to. So people that come in, I've seen them over the years, they come in, they have their heyday, they go away. Names that you wouldn't even recognize today that were in 10 or 15 years ago are gone, because there's nothing lasting. There's a fleeting little moment of adulation on social media, or maybe they get published in a magazine, or maybe they even get in an art show or somewhere, or an exhibition, but they've never put together the comprehensive plan of why they've chosen this process. They chose it because it got attention. They chose it because their digital or film photographs will never get that kind of attention. They're just like everybody else's. So as time goes on, you'll see people come into the process and leave, come into the process and leave. And the people that stay, the real staying power for people in this process are the people that can answer those questions that I had up there a minute ago, that can or be on their way to answering, right? There's no, and again, this isn't about right or wrong or any of that. Just be able to talk about those questions up there. That's really what it is at the end of the day, is being able to talk about your work, understanding why you're making the work. And I just wanted to share those quotes and give you a little bit of food for thought. And if you haven't read those books, the biggest thing, if you haven't read those books, go grab those 3, find them online or whatever. And again, the Sontag book is probably a little bit dense, especially if English isn't your first language. You might have to read it a couple of times, but they're very good. They have really good information, and they're super, super valuable for people like I've described. And it's not for everyone. If you're in this just to be in it, this is probably not relevant for you. But if you're in it as an artist, as a person who wants to become better with their work and have well-rounded body of work, you start working on those questions. Those books are called, Samuel's asking this. Let's see. Those books, I'll put those up again real quick here. Go back here. These are all 3 books, but they're right. Let's see here. I have to, go through the slideshow again. There they are. Susan Sontag's On Photography, Barthes' Camera Lucida, and Berger's Ways of Seeing. Those are the books. Highly recommend them. And maybe I'll try to do this once in a while, see if we can have a little, I love the technical stuff, but at the end of the day, really, we can share all the technical stuff, but if you don't have some ideas of where you want to go or how you want to approach it, it might be a little different. You're welcome, Samuel. I highly recommend them. So that's it. That's all I got, guys. I don't know if you guys have anything else you want to share or talk about, but I hope that was somewhat valuable. I think if you read those over again and try to really, I said food for thought, and that's really what all it is it's just starting to think a little bit about your own work, why you're working, and then have some questions. A lot of times it's just living with the questions for a while. And I think at the end of the day, you'll find that the answers will come. The more you explore, the answers will come. They're difficult. They're difficult questions, no doubt. So guys, I'm gonna let you go. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Thank you for listening to me ramble. And I appreciate all your support, the books, the stuff, all that stuff. Thank you, Boguslav. I appreciate that. And I'll see you next Saturday. If you guys want to join me, I'll be here. I'll be here talking to myself if you're not. Ciao. Stay safe and stay healthy and stay happy. Ciao. Bye-bye.